In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Veni Sancti Spiritus Repletorum Codiviterium. Et tui amoris in eis in macenne, emite Spiritum tuum creabuntur.
Renovavis pacem terrae.
Oremus Deus Codiviterium. Sancti Spiritus, illustrationem docuisti. Da nobis in eodem Spiritu recta sapere, et esem pegastinos in caderere. Per Christum nominum nostrum, cum Maria Immaculatum,
Ora pro nobis.
Sancte Joseph,
Ora pro nobis.
Sancte Pie Quinque,
Ora pro nobis.
in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. So today is the great feast of St. Pius V. He is great for numerous reasons. He canonized the Tridentine Mass. He canonized and finalized the Council of Trent and implemented it. What else did he do regarding England?
He dethroned and excommunicated Elizabeth.
Yeah, that was a big deal. And a lot of modern historians criticize him for that. Because they say, see, he instigated the persecution on his own priests and on the Catholic Church. He knew that would happen. But he also knew better dying for the faith and keeping the faith than to lose it by osmosis. Lose it by just being poisoned by the Protestant spirit. So if he didn't excommunicate Queen Elizabeth, it would have been a greater disaster for England. They would have gone. Well, they went into apostasy anyway, but he's heavily criticized for that by modern historians. But he did the right thing. He put the faith first over convenience, over agreements. And that's just how it has to be. Okay, let's pick up. We're going to look at this chart on page 83. This was just a little addition put in by Father Gersbacher years ago. Cantism is the modern heresy. Do you have that on the top right corner? St. Pius X?
No.
Oh, really? So you want to write that in. Cantism. Put it up on the right-hand corner. Cantism is the modern heresy. St. Pius X. Cantism is the modern heresy. What's Cantism, anybody?
Truth is relative?
Yeah, well, yes. It's more deadly than that. Truth is totally what? Not just relative, because relative can be still objective, but truth becomes totally subjective. It's what you make it. It's how you perceive things. And what's deadly about Cantism is he applies it to all reality. So when you draw the right conclusions with Cantism, does your desk exist? Do your chairs exist? How can you know? How can you be sure they exist? And then, of course, they always take the example. When you put a stick in water, it looks like it bends, but does it bend? No. But that's what it's a stupid argument, but this is what they use. And they say, well, how can you trust your reason outside of water? Maybe it's bending still.
If anything, that proves objective truth, because it's the water that's bent.
That's right. That's right. And of course, if there's a tree that falls in the woods and there's no ear to hear it, it doesn't make a sound.
Yeah.
What does Aristotle and St. Thomas say?
They all say yes.
What does the average Joe farmer who has some common sense say?
Yes.
Of course it does. But what does these polished fingernail, palm olive hands, philosophers like Kant and Descartes say?
They say you can't be sure.
Yes. Total poison. Total poison. Bishop Williamson used to speak about this in the seminary years ago, and he used to say, you know, these rotten professors who teach this to the college kids today, you know, they teach this skepticism on all truth. Yet when they get up in the morning, they depend on their alarm clock. They depend on their coffee maker to make their coffee. They get in their car, they drive to the university. They expect the car to act like a car. The traffic laws and lights, or roundabouts in England, to act like, you know, the traffic is truly there. They don't doubt reality when they go to work, you see? But when they come into the classroom, oh, we're not sure if reality exists. These people are so seriously sick and perverted. They should never be tolerated. But this is what's taught in all the universities, without exception, except for probably Jewish universities that are training Jews. They probably don't buy this nonsense. They don't give that to their own kids. Jews make sure their kids don't watch Hollywood movies. Jews, the most decent of them, don't let their kids have a cell phone at a young age. The Jews, with their own people, they make sure they get good food. But with the Goyim, they feed them all this poison. Let's look at the chart. See chapter 5. All right. Anti-intellectualism. So this is one of the demonic attacks on the modern world, is to pervert noble and good friendship and to pervert the intellect. This diagram attempts to show graphically the main attitudes of mind and principle philosophical movements which have produced religious indifference, in which in chapter 5 of Christian Origins we have described as what?
Anti-intellectualism.
Yes, anti-intellectualism, the death of the intellect. So if people don't think anymore, which is what communist nations want, the communist governments get rid of those who think. In Ukraine and Russia, they quickly killed off all professors, priests, bishops, sisters, professors, anyone who could think and lead others, they killed them off quickly. The farmers who led the reactions, they killed them off too. So, in the main, the IS, is that an M or an N? MS, on the left, are attitudes of mind. Those on the right are philosophical systems. All right, so we're going from the 1400s down to the 1900s on the left column. So let's look at the Renaissance, because this coincides very well with what we're doing with Archbishop Lefebvre. 1400s Renaissance, the individualism in secular life, secularism in religious life, homocentric universe. What's homocentric mean?
Man-centered.
What's theocentric?
God-centered.
So remember here, basically before the Renaissance, it was a theocentric framework of thinking. Everything was based on reality. That God is God, we have heaven to gain, hell to avoid. The church is one and universal, and she's the only one true. And you know, it was a healthy air to breathe. Healthy air. But with the Renaissance, you get all this poison starting. So nominalism starts at you have that in there, right? Nominalism and Occam, you see those? Is that written in yours?
I don't see nominalism. No.
How is that possible? Maybe his computer, do copy machines, can they eliminate handwritten stuff as opposed to typed?
It could be not as dark, maybe, if it...
I mean, it's as dark as day here, dark as night here. All right, so put around 1400s, actually it's towards the end of the 1300s, you get William of Occam, and put nominalism, around the 1400s zone. And on the far right, put his name, Occam, Occham, William of Occam. Occam. In England, so he's over here. So he's the one that introduced nominalism, which is really the crack of the door for all the other rotten philosophies. Once you deny that the intellect can know universal ideas and know truth and the substance of things, then the ball is spinning. It's an avalanche of destruction. So St. Bernard, even when he was alive, he died, I think, in the early 1200s. He said, I can already see the cracks in Christendom for its destruction, unless men really convert and come back to truth. He saw the cracks. All right. Left side, 1400s, 1500s. On the far right, you have loss of authentic philosophical tradition. So you start having this departure from Thomism and scholasticism. And it takes two strands, those who go into intellectual errors and those who deny the intellect altogether and say the intellect is just pretty useless. And from there you get the spiritual school of Thomas Kempis. And he started a group called the Fraternity of Little Brothers. And basically, they went all about piety. Piety, devotions, novenas, but without study of theology or philosophy or sound logic. So, not that it's bad in itself, but you have a divorce already, which is dangerous. In the Catholic age, you have knowledge or science with piety. St. Thomas wrote the Summa, but no one was more pious than him. He would go to the tabernacle when a difficult question and ask our Lord. He had a deep, contemplative life. And that's the beauty of the Dominican order. They unite contemplation and piety together. But with the Fraternity of the Little Brothers, it's divorced. So they start despising knowledge, and piety becomes something separate from science, from knowledge. And I won't go too deeply into that, but just to say, piety without the guiding of theology will end up in apparitionism, just following any apparition that happens and any devotion, and it can lend itself to false devotion and false piety. It can be dangerous. And I'm not condemning Thomas of Kempis's work, The Imitation of Christ, but I'm just telling you where it comes from. That's why he can say in his book, better to feel contrition than to know its definition. So he's right in a certain way. He's correct. It's better to feel contrition and have it than to know all its distinctions and what it is and definitions. But with the sound theology, both is what you need. Know what contrition is and have it also. Right? But he was a reaction against the sophists of scholasticism. So he got, it's wherever there's men, there can be decadence and over-exaggeration. So he was dealing with over-exaggeration at the end of scholastic period in the 1400s. You'd have clerics just arguing for arguing's sake, not for love of truth. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? And you'd get big disputes, big debates. But then he would see I suppose, he must have seen the hypocrisy of all these theologians who can argue on theology, no definitions, but they have no real spiritual life. And he must have seen the contradiction and must have been scandalized by it, right? So he said, well, forget theology, forget scholastic studies, forget philosophy. What matters is to have the interior spiritual life. And so piety is separated from theology and science. But in the beauty of the Thomistic age is, no, they go together. Piety is guided by true theology and philosophy. Philosophy helps piety from going into apparitionism and error. But once you separate the two, it's a car without brakes. It's very dangerous.
And Father,
Yeah.
Even the church herself, like when the church is trying to decide like what's an authentic miracle, they need that bond of the science with the piety to see if it's a real miracle or not. So
Yeah.
even the church herself uses that
Yeah,
marriage
that's true.
between the two.
That is correct. Yes. And God intended it that way, right? We're intellect, but the intellect is higher. It's the highest part of man. And the will is set in the heart, so to speak. Not that it's emotion, because it's a spiritual faculty. But the intellect is above the will. The will is like the engine. The intellect is like the steering wheel. You need both to work, right? If it's all steering wheel and no engine, well, you might know all the directions to go everywhere, but you're not going to move it an inch. But if you have all will without the steering wheel, that's dangerous. That's like a Tesla. Someone who worked for Tesla told me, once in a while you get these hackers that can hack into the car. Or it's just a fluke accident where the brakes don't work because it's all run by computer, and every computer has some snag and some buffing and some problem sometime. And he said it's not a few incidents where the brakes didn't work and the car just kept accelerating and the driver had no control and they crashed. So that's all engine without intellect. So that's piety without the sound teaching of the church to guide, right? So that was the movement called Moderna Devotio, Devotio Moderna. Devotio Moderna, modern devotion, which was more emphasis on the feeling aspect of devotion rather than the understanding of the faith. But the wonderful thing about Archbishop Lefebvre, out of this crisis, is he keeps the union of both. He keeps the union of good theology, but also piety. Very important. Okay? So, and then Reformation, the denial of authority with Protestantism. We don't need a pope. We don't need bishops. We don't need anyone over me. I can interpret the Bible as I see. So the Reformation, better called, as G.K. Chesterton said, called what?
The Protestant Revolution.
Yeah, but what he called the Reformation?
Oh, they call it the Deformation?
Deformation, yeah. He called it the Deformation and the Enlightenment, the Endarkment period. And he's correct. So denial of authority, individualism in religion. So religion now just becomes me and God. No reference to sacraments, the church, going to confession, going to the priests for guidance or for the sacraments. No obedience to any authority, to the Pope, right? A good Pope at least. And in those days they had more or less good popes. All right, and then on the left side, 1600s, rationalist religions. On the right you have, there's Galileo in there as well. Galileo is in the late 1500s. And then Cartesianism, cogito ergo sum. Cartesianism, coming from René Descartes, falsely stated the problem of knowledge and false psychology. So his problem of knowledge is that he based everything on the subject. I think, therefore I am. All right, and then later 1600s, you have on the left side what?
Deism.
Which is the denial of the usefulness of the supernatural revelation. So once you throw off the church, then what's role has supernatural to play in my life? So the deist period went into the 1700s, which was Ben Franklin was a deist, Thomas Jefferson was a deist, John Adams, I think, large number, Washington, they were all influenced by this. Yeah.
So, Father, if I'm correct, deism is the belief that God kind of created the world and then he kind of doesn't have anything to do, like he doesn't interfere. He kind of just creates it and lets it go.
That's right. Doesn't love, doesn't care. It's like a father who has his family but never his home. Right? And the children don't, where's dad? Where's my father? They don't feel loved. The family goes into chaos. Mother rules the roost. She needs a husband too to guide her. And so it's a headless family. So deism is deadly because it's very sister to Jansenism, this coldness about God. All right? So deism, and on the right side you have, in the 1700s, from Cartesianism and Kantism, you have on the right side idealism as opposed to sensism. And then in the mid 1700s, on the right side, idealism will lead to
Subjectivism.
yes, transcendental idealism of Kant, the philosophy of Protestantism. That's well said, isn't it? Kant is the philosophy of Protestantism. That's well put. Very well put. And then subjectivism leads to
Agnosticism.
yes. So if all truth is within me, how can I know that I even know the truth? How do I know I even exist? On the right side, you have
Materialism.
so if spiritual things don't matter, then just focus on the here and now. All right, and then materialism will lead to,
Positivism.
which will lead to
Sentimentalism. No, I'm sorry. Pragmatism.
pragmatism. Yeah, just all that matters is what's practical. And all thought and thinking and philosophy is for the birds. And then scientism, which will break off, we'll see that. So from subjectivism, you have agnosticism, and from there you have
Sentimentalism.
reaction against irreligious tendency of agnosticism. So you have, that would be the 1800s, the Romantic period. It shows up in the music. As Father Ruiz often gives little lectures on Chopin as being Romantic period. Another big Romantic is, who else? Wagner. Ever hear Wagner's pieces?
Yes.
Yeah, Bishop Williamson really liked Wagner. He loved Beethoven, and he could play it on piano. He was quite talented, and he loved Beethoven. And he said Beethoven, it was in the 1700s, you can hear the French Revolution, rebellion and thunder in him. He calls Bach the great grandfather of rock and roll.
Bach or Beethoven?
Excuse me, Beethoven.
Okay.
Yeah, Beethoven. Thanks. So with this sentimentalism in the music, at least, and in the arts, you have this overemphasis on the emotional side of things. So, and then from scientism, it breaks off into what? By the 1900s?
Liberal Protestantism.
And then?
Modernism.
And then?
Religious indifferentism.
It doesn't matter what you believe. And then?
Anti-intellectualism and religion.
Yeah, so religion is just all about sentiment. You know, you have your cup of tea, I have mine. Let's not start any fights. Let's not even discuss religion because it's just puffy and has nothing to do with reality. Let's talk sports, let's talk business, let's talk politics, but leave religion out of it. That's the modern world, isn't it? It really is. And it's this false statement that religion is the cause of all wars. Well, it's true. Every war is religious, but not every religion is the cause of war. And what's going on right now with Israel is a religious war, right? It's a religious war.
Or even non-religious wars, if they were to say that was a thing, because atheism is a religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if they say everything is based off of religion, they don't want to call it that.
But what is their solution? And what's the solution of Vatican II? It's a false peace. But what is the true solution? That's always been since the Incarnation.
Christ the King.
Yeah.
The reign of Christ the King, of his Sacred Heart, implementing his teachings, which are summed up in the Gospels and in the Catechism. So the answer is not, bash religion and let's just get along. It is bring the true religion. That's the answer. That's what the priest has to restore to this world. It's really dying and sick. It needs the love of Christ, the Sacred Heart, his sacraments, his redemption. And it needs traditional Catholicism. That's the only answer. Traditional Catholicism is the only remedy for all the ills of the modern world. It is. It is.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
Going back a little bit, could you say the distinctions between idealism and sensism again? What's the contrast there? Idealism and sensism.
Where are we here? Oh, idealism and sensism.
Yeah, around the 1700s.
Idealism is basically the all intellect nerd,
Okay.
and sensism is the all about feeling.
Oh, emotions. Okay, yeah.
So, open brackets. It's interesting that in the Greek education, in the Greek education, which was really put out by Plato in his Republic, their formation was they had to do wrestling, they had to do physical training, they had to do some training for war. So that tamed and disciplined the bestial side of men. But that he doesn't just become an ignorant beast that can kill and not make a sentence. See, they used to make fun of some of the basketball players years ago, and they're careful now who they interview. But some of the basketball players, they couldn't make a sentence when they were interviewed. So people kind of said, all right. But they started interviewing, the guys in the sports who had some intelligence with their fortitude. So, so idealism is the intellectual nerd. The sensism is the sentimental, either the fighter or just all sentiment.
Yeah.
While Catholicism keeps the union of both. Oh, so as I was saying, in the Greek education, they gave formation in the physical side of military training and wrestling and all that. And that's where, marathon runs and all that. And then on the other side, they made sure that the boys had an education in music and poetry. But it wasn't poetry like the modern world thinks, a Hallmark card, drinking tea with your finger and pinky in the air. It wasn't that. Poesis in the Greek formation was a man who could think and convey his thoughts by rhetoric and structure his thoughts by logic. So you have logic, structuring the thoughts, rhetoric, delivering, so you can form a cohesive defense of truth and be understood. And this is the danger. Well, could be the human faults of many priests is they're deeply spiritual or they're very intelligent, but they can't preach. They just can't convey what their thoughts are. So their sermons they get lost in the wind because they can't either speak clearly or they just mumble or they... So you will have some training on delivering sermons because that's part of charity. That's part of charity, is to deliver something. You're giving the truth, so it has to be delivered in a comprehensible way. Otherwise, you give a diamond in a box, but they can't open the box. But it is true. The priest on his side has to realize you can be the most clear preacher, the most fervent preacher, but you're just a jackass with a stole. That's all the priest is. If there's any fruit, it's God, the Holy Ghost, using the jackass to bring the message. And as long as we remember that, we'll be okay. The moment priests think they're, it's me and it's that, then it's extremely dangerous. And his soul is in danger too, by a false pride. All right, and then, so that answers your question. So the Greeks had this, in their formation of the education, it was both. Form the intellect and form the body also, to be strong, to be manly and disciplined. So it's a very wise. But music also had a role in their education as well, to form and discipline and put to a goal the soft side of men, so to speak. The music appeals to the emotional side. And Plato even says rock and roll music or heavily rhythmic music should be banned from the city. It should be banned. The only time he says it can be tolerated is when men go to war. So that's why you have the Scottish playing the bagpipes and drums going into war. That's why you have the drums beating when they go into war, because it gets the animal fighting passion stirred up. So that's why a lot of athletes, they listen to this rotten pounding music because it psychs them up for the competition. So there is some truth to that. But notice Plato said, music unrestrained will bring the city walls down, will destroy the city. How right he is. Look how many youth have been destroyed and now are in hell because of the rock music. Rock music, which gives a message. It's a gospel. So, rock music is all rhythm without much melody. And Satan knew this. Satan is a prince of music. He's good at music. Angels in heaven are musicians. All right, on the left side you have deism and then rationalism, 1700s. This is the age of the French Revolution. Denial of the possibility of
supernatural revelation.
So not even possible. There's a total rejection of the supernatural. And that leads, a next step would be subjectivism. Put that in right above the 1800s, if it's not in there. Subjectivism.
It's on the right side, right there.
Yeah, so we're right up here. Oh yeah, put it there. It's on both sides actually, yeah. Right, subjectivism right here. There's the stone, right there. Yeah, subjectivism is a biggie because that's what Pius X is going to say modernism is mainly based on. And when Archbishop Lefebvre said in one of his last conferences, Vatican II is entirely subjective. Truth is not objective, it's what's in man. And this is what uncrowns Christ the King. 1800s, you have then what?
Naturalism.
So the denial of the supernatural, which leads to?
Atheism.
Yeah. So Pope Leo XIII will rightly say, indifferentism regarding religions leads to?
State atheism.
Yes. And then in the 1900s, you have liberal Protestantism, modernism, religious indifferentism, and all that. Note well, read the little caption there, nota bene, Anthony.
Arrows indicate influence of isms on general trend of modern thought. This influence is not necessarily direct, but has inevitably produced the anomaly of liberal Protestantism, which, since it denies or doubts all essential doctrines of Christianity, is Christian only in name.
Yes. So modern, on the bottom left, do you have this? Jacques Maritain, 3 Errors of the Age, which are?
Agnosticism, naturalism, angelism.
Angelism is unhinged piety. So I guess it would be equivalent to the yoga, transcendental meditation, Wiccism. That's
Like spiritualism.
yeah, angelism without truth. And then on the bottom, do you have ideas have immense results? Do you see that? So ideas have consequences is the key. And then this is taken from Christian Origins by Father Patrick Maget, S.J., a Jesuit priest who wrote this many years ago, long before the council. Okay, and then tomorrow we will start going into the historical authority of the 4 Gospels. So that should be exciting. Agitatorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Perfectionem et